Welcome to the Digital Cow Network. I'm your host, Heather Flanagan, and in today's episode, we're going to dive a little bit further in the world of web privacy. Specifically, we're going to explore something called FedCM, the Federated Credential Management API, the pivotal role of the World Wide Web Consortium, and how the evolving standards in this space actually affect us all. So there's several web features out there that support critical basic security functions like logging in and logging out. And as mentioned on the previous episode, these same features enable tracking individuals as they surf the web. Now, unfortunately, fixing this is not as simple as just turning those features off for trackers, because from a purely technical perspective, whether these features are used for authentication-related purposes or for tracking, they're indistinguishable from the web browser's perspective. So, of all the features described in the previous episode that serve legitimate and clandestine purposes, third-party cookies are one of the more tractable problems to resolve. So let's look a little bit about where that work is happening, one of the new mechanisms being developed to replace third-party cookies, and overall what the changes are going to look like. So where the work is happening, the World Wide Web Consortium, also known as the W3C, is where most of the work happens between browser vendors and various other stakeholder groups to standardize functionality on the web. This global community effectively shapes the web, ensuring it's secure, efficient, and open for everyone. Their work is crucial for the standards that we rely on every day. Diving into the details of how the W3C works is probably a little bit more than you want to know for this video, but feel free to reach out if you'd like to learn more. I have a Heather AI on my website that can answer a whole lot of questions about this if you're curious. But let's look specifically at the Federated Credential Manager, or FedCM. So developed primarily by Google and incubated within the W3C, this API represents a significant shift in managing privacy and online authentication. As I mentioned earlier, a browser's biggest challenge is distinguishing between acceptable use and hidden tracking. The purpose of the FedCM API is to help the browser determine whether a transaction is happening with the individual's knowledge and consent or not. So let's dive into how that works and why it matters. So rather than acting like one of those really annoying cookie banners that pops up and say, "Do you accept these cookies?" FedCM is designed to be called when an individual clicks on the login or sign-in button on a website. Before the website, which is also known as the relying party in this case, the site responsible for authentication, which is the identity provider, before it can share any information, FedCM exists to mediate the transaction and make sure the individual is aware and okay with what's about to happen. And surprisingly enough, it's not that easy, because the FedCM developers must find a way to support two really conflicting goals. Particularly, on the one hand, there is the situation of, well, of course, the identity provider does need to know what website, what relying party is asking for an authentication request, because, the identity providers aren't just going to talk to anybody. On the flip side, there are arguments that the identity provider shouldn't know anything about the site that's asking for information, because if it did, then the identity provider might start tracking user visits based on the relying party that's coming in. Whatever. Both statements are actually 100% valid, and that's one of the reasons why this problem hasn't been solved yet. So FedCM is just part of the work that's underway. Google, Apple, Mozilla, and others are all innovating under the W3C's umbrella, working together towards a more private web. These initiatives are reshaping our whole online experience. Now, some of the work focuses on enabling ethically targeted advertising, which is something that's happening in the Private Advertising Technology Community Group, also known as the PATCG. The Privacy Community Group, on the other hand, has more than a few efforts in incubation, including one that's focused on link decoration, also known as navigation-based tracking. So each browser vendor also has their own internal projects that influence and are influenced by what happens within the W3C. The Google's Privacy Sandbox is probably the most public of these efforts and describes various tools that they're using to build a more privacy-preserving web experience. Coming back to third-party cookies. So a major milestone is approaching, though how quickly kind of depends on who you're talking to. So in Q1 2024, Google began turning off third-party cookies for 1% of Chrome users. Now, this test run is critical for their long-term privacy strategy because they are years behind Apple, a company that turned off third-party cookies by default in 2017 for Safari users. Firefox, the browser coming from Mozilla, turned off third-party cookies by default in April of 2023. But any changes Google makes impacts a lot more people. The Chrome browser has by far and away the largest market share of desktop browsers in the world. And they're also part of a much larger company called Alphabet, which still has several products that require third-party cookies to be available. And you can't ignore the fact that Alphabet and Google, they provide advertisements. So there's a perceived conflict of interest happening here. So the shift on Google's part to turn off third-party cookies by default for just a tiny fraction of their users might seem minor, but its implications are really pretty big. Organizations must prepare for potential challenges and educate their people on these evolving technologies because, for example, support desks already know to check to see a browser setting, but not everyone can or will call support. So you're in a situation where your people may find, but it's not working for this one person. Why not? We don't know. Companies really should start turning off third-party cookies by default now to develop their plans, which should include testing out the new API being developed within the W3C, the FedCM API, so that the organizations can start adapting to changes. It's really time for businesses that aren't browser vendors to be proactive in helping the web develop. Develop strategies, train your teams, help define the solution, because it's not just about reacting to what big tech is telling you to do. It's about being prepared for a whole new era of the web. Now, I've had this conversation with individuals representing dozens of organizations in the last few years, and the biggest challenge has always been that the executives are very focused on their bottom line, and I get that. These executives want to know what to do and when to do it. Given that these APIs and work are still very much under development, we don't know exactly what to do, and we don't know exactly when it's going to be done. But for the executives, until they have answers to those questions, they're not inclined to assign resources to help other organizations figure out solutions. However, if your organization wants to make sure that the web works the way it needs to, you need to invest in that little bit of speculation. You need to assign people to test the proposed APIs and offer constructive feedback on how the code might be changed to better support your use case. So are you eager to learn more, to get your company involved? There are links in the show notes to where the work is happening and where you can find out more information, because your participation can actually influence the entire future of web privacy. Now, we've covered a lot today, from the W3C's vital role to the specifics of FedCM and beyond. And remember, these changes are shaping a safer, more private web for all of us. So I want you to stay curious. I want you to stay informed. And if you have questions, go to Heather AI on my website, sphericalcowconsulting.com, and go ahead and just interact and ask your questions. And otherwise, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts. And I look forward to engaging with you on our next video.